Okay, by way of introduction, my name is Graeme Agnew. I'm the IT Director within Digby Brown, and obviously as part of the portfolio of responsibilities that myself and the rest of the wider team have got in the IT department across Digby Brown, we consider cyber security to be a huge threat to us and B, a serious responsibility to manage that threat to the organisation. And what I'd like to do this afternoon is take some time to walk through with you a number of key points, key items round about cybersecurity. I fully respect and understand the fact that we might have people attending this webinar this afternoon coming from different backgrounds. Some of you will have legal expertise, some of you might work in IT, maybe not, coming from different organisational sizes as well. And we've all got our own experience and flavour in terms of cybersecurity. So all I really want to do this afternoon is offer my tuppence worth in terms of what I think is really important, the threats to look out for, and some of the steps that can be considered to look to mitigate those huge threats to all sorts of organisations, not just law firms in this present time and given the world that we live in this day and age. So what I'll do is I'll just kick right off with the presentation. Just to mention as well before I do get started that feel free if anybody wants to raise any questions in the chat. Natasha's going to moderate that for me and either decide whether to raise the question when I'm mid-presentation or raise any of your questions towards the end. But this is designed very much to be interactive. So yeah, please do engage and let me know if you've got any comments or questions you want to raise through the Teams chat. Okay, so to get started, the agenda in a bit more detail, I'm going to talk through a brief flavour around about the risk picture with cybersecurity facing organisations today. I'm going to highlight some stats and publicly documented cyber breach examples. Then talk about the possible business impact that cyber breaches can cause on firms. Touch a bit in terms of the most recent kind of June, July, August type cyber breach profile using some external stats and data that I've compiled, just to again give you a flavour for what's happening out there. Then I'm going to go on and talk about security defences. What can we do to mitigate as best we can the risk in terms of cybersecurity attacks and the disruption that they can cause, and crucially, where should we start or where can we start with respect to that? Leading on from that and related to it, I'll also talk about some recommended cyber technology defences that you could consider for your own firm to put in place. Then I'll look a bit ahead into the future and as stated already, then happy to take any questions and we can walk through the Q&A in that regard. Okay, so first and foremost, the risk picture. It's worth emphasising right from the get-go here that cyber attacks are absolutely real. They're prevalent, unfortunately. They're also, unfortunately, expertly performed. And most unfortunately, nobody is actually immune from those. Any business can be a target of cyber attacks. Attacks can be targeted against an individual law firm, in this example here, or indeed they can be random purely by a process of an organisation being connected to the internet and running various forms of technology software. So I want to touch on the most common attack methods that exist in today's world, first and foremost. So starting with the diagram on the left, at the top left of that, incoming emails that include either malicious links or attachments have for many years and continue to be the #1 attack vector that businesses face. What's crucial to understand is that in more recent times, over the last few years or so, maybe 2, 3, 4 years, there's been a noticeable change there where to try and evade IT security email defences, detecting traditionally viruses and malware, more recently looking to analyse the full email and its contents and so on. What threat actors or hackers have started doing over that period of time is actually sending emails with links and or attachments which are clean at the time of delivery, but when you open up those links or attachments, they can connect you to an external website, and the hackers only look to weaponise that website, which will introduce the threat to your organisation after the emails are actually delivered. So in essence, what they're doing there is sending emails, they get through the security defences for email checks because they're clean at the time of delivery, and then soon thereafter, usually minutes, usually hours, they will then weaponise the connected website that's connected in through those attachments or links. So that's a new form of threat, and that places a real emphasis not just in technology defences, but also human understanding and defences across the staff population in any business. Exploitation of vulnerable software in the top right in the diagram here is also really prevalent. I'll touch on this in more detail later on, but the amount of software vulnerabilities that are announced every month by leading technology software vendors and the amount of patching that you need to do in relation to that is a really big thing in this day and age. And it's very common that organisations can and indeed have been exploited only because they're running other people's software, which happens to have vulnerabilities in it, and vulnerabilities being discovered by the hackers on a recurring basis. Down the bottom right, social engineering is also a key method of attack, whereby users or employees within a firm are manipulated and persuaded into revealing confidential information to threat actors, which can lead to data theft, ransomware deployment, and so on. Marks and Spencer's sadly is a good example, a public example of that in recent times, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in the next slide. Malicious websites, I've touched on that with regards to malicious links and attachments, but websites even sometimes searched through Google in your browser window can often lead to compromise of businesses. And lastly, the fifth thing to highlight here is user credential theft and password theft, which can ultimately lead to that can be through social engineering or through technical steps taken out by hackers, but ultimately that can lead to the ability for hackers to remotely access company networks and log in with authentication, and then from there look to move laterally and to look to deploy ransomware, steal data, etc. So these are traditionally, but also here and now, some of the most common attack methods that we see across industry. Just to touch on the bullet points on the right as well, what we're also now seeing in the world is that artificial intelligence is also increasingly being used to make attacks more intelligent, more convincing, particularly around about social engineering and phishing emails and so on. So that's stepping up the level of capability and intelligence that threat actors can choose to deploy. With that in mind, we're all now having to, and indeed should be, fighting cyber AI threats with cyber AI technology, and again, more on that later on. Another key point here is that every business is different, that their risk profile, their threats that they face, the business impact they might incur should a cyber threat be successful. It needs consideration of both the cost of managing that threat, but also the risk to that business as well. So that's a recommendation in terms of a key theme. Consider your own business model, the types of services that you provide, and therefore with that in mind, properly impact assess a successful cyber breach in your business and use that to drive and influence the level of cost, spend and risk management that you choose to undertake within your business. Okay, so that's a flavour in terms of the risk picture overall. If I just move on, just to give you some publicly documented, relatively recent cyber examples. Before I go into the three that you can see in the three boxes there, it's worth saying first and foremost that global cybercrime damages are projected by the end of this year to reach $10.5 trillion US. It's absolutely incredible. And that's also backed up with a very interesting statement from the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. They actually suggest that cybercrime damages across industry are now more than 15 times larger than the global illegal drugs trade put together. So it just shows you the enormity in terms of the threat and the impact and the financial damage that cyber threats can cause. So looking at three public examples, and all the data that I've got here on the screen does come publicly. It's not my opinion, it's a fact that I've taken from the internet. The Weir Group, a Scottish multinational business, were compromised in September 2021. They faced a targeted ransomware attack. As a consequence of that, Weir downgraded its full year profit forecast from around about 270 million to between 230 and 245 million. So you can see the financial impact there. Excuse me. And furthermore, it impacted their share price, which dropped by about 3% directly after that ransomware attack. Arnold Clark, another very well-known Scottish organisation, in December 22, they faced a data theft of about 15 gigabytes of data, which was allegedly posted on the dark web, on the internet, the kind of underground aspects of the internet, where threat actors will share stolen data and ways to compromise businesses and so on with each other, and look to sell such a thing as well when they get their hands on such data. Thousands of customers launched a multi-million-pound group action claim against Arnold Clark because of stolen data, subject data, which the belief was it impacted their privacy, obviously. So that really had a really detrimental effect for Arnold Clark in terms of the recovery from that, the process they had to go through to deal with all of this. And obviously, brand perception as well. Any business that's hit with such a thing is going to face challenges, unfortunately, against their brand perception. And then finally, the most recent example, as I touched on in the last slide, Marks and Spencer's. Again, they faced a ransomware attack back in the early summer of this year. It's reported online that their online operations were crippled for over 6 weeks. The company estimated at the time that £300 million in lost profits took place, though it did expect to recover up to half of that through cyber insurance. And I'll touch on cyber insurance again later on in the slide deck here. The fallout also included a £650 million drop in their market value, and as I understand it from public information, over 1,000 customers have joined a class action lawsuit over that breach. So these are three high-level summaries in terms of outlining the very serious impact that a successful cyber attack can have on organisations, and it's no different for law firms, for Digby Brown, for any business out there. If compromised, obviously the severity of the impact can be really, really serious indeed. Okay, so just moving on from there. A bit more in terms of possible business impacts, and some of you will have maybe different levels of understanding about the different threat types that exist. So apologies if you're all aware of what I'm presenting in this slide. But we've got ransomware. I've touched on this already. What threat actors do is they gain network access onto a company network. They encrypt laptops and PCs, servers and data, so the operations of that firm are seriously disabled. They then demand a very high value ransom to offer to provide decryption keys to allow that business to decrypt what's happened with ransomware and continue their operations again. There's a lot of research, interesting perspectives across industry coming from intelligence organisations and government bodies as well, where the typical recommendation is not to pay a ransom. It might sound, whilst expensive, an easy way out relatively quickly from a ransomware attack, but the recommendations across government bodies and other intelligent bodies seems to be don't pay the ransom, but engage external help to negotiate with the threat actors if you find yourself in such a situation, and also be aware that if you do pay the ransom, it's unfortunate that the business in question will then probably be a higher target for further ransomware attacks, because A, it's been deemed vulnerable, and B, it's been deemed easy prey for a payout to happen, which is obviously the motivator of the threat actors with ransomware. Moving on to data theft, it's obvious to say that this is obviously often coupled with ransomware, and this is where, again, threat actors got into the network in question, managed to move laterally across that network to access data and basically steal it by exporting it out the business's network onto their own servers and their own storage. So coupling it with ransomware is actually very common as well. Either or both can happen together. That data then is often posted for sale on the dark web, again with ransom demands made to the business in question, and it can also include customer sensitive data and indeed usernames and passwords, which can get publicly posted in the dark web as well, in an attempt to allow future targets against that same business too. Naturally, through both of those things, or either of those things, brand reputation is really serious as well. Websites can be defaced, leading to very public brand embarrassment for organisations. That can lead to lost customers or clients, and it can lead to legal claims, and situations like this obviously been published in the press and the media as well. So all very damaging to a business, and it goes beyond just the financial impact, but also the reputational impact as well. Back in the financial fraud aspects, so often traditional social engineering is used to undertake financial fraud, but over and above that as well, intercepted email invoices, invoices coming into your business through email delivery channels can often be compromised, whereby the threat actors can seize temporarily the invoice in question. They can change the bank details in that invoice, so that when a payment is then made to the purported supplier, even if it comes across as a real supplier that you use, then the bank details are being changed and the money goes into a fraudulent account and not to the supplier in question. So having really robust financial controls, process controls around about that to verify the bank details you hold and any changes to bank details which come forward, and matching the bank details to payments before they're made are also really key as well. And then I don't know if some of you sat on the presentation I did earlier this year on artificial intelligence overall, but I touched there in terms of artificial intelligence deep fake, as it's called, which is where AI is used to mimic somebody, either their voice or their kind of video representation. There was one company, a Taiwanese company, who reported to have lost over $25 million US by having an AI deep fake contact made with them, and they used social engineering to persuade people within the finance department there to transfer that $25 million US into what was obviously in hindsight a fraudulent set of bank details, a fraudulent bank account. So I've got a video down here that can bring that alive very much. I'm just going to jump into this and just play it for a couple of minutes just to give you a flavour of some of the software that's out there that can help manage such threats, but also what that threat looks like and how realistic it can come across. So it's a very interesting video. So I'll pause talking for a couple of minutes and just change window and let that play through for you. Okay.
Hi Graham, it's Natasha. It's just to say that there's no audio coming through with that video.
Oh, is there not? I think, sorry, bear
No.
with me, 2 seconds.
No, you're fine, don't worry. Thank you.
Okay, Natasha, can you see the presentation again now? Can you hear me okay?
Yep, can see and can hear you.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that. Okay, that's unfortunate. I think we had the same issue the last time we tried to share this video, but when the slides get sent out afterwards, you can click this yourself and watch that back. It is very interesting and quite an eye-opener in terms of how easy it is to create deep fake impressions and how easily these can be used to try to persuade people to, well, in this case, transfer large sums of money. So it's another threat to consider, obviously, within your own organisation with the advent of AI in today's world as well. Okay, so I'll just move on from there and just talk about kind of recent events, again, as reported externally. So in the spring of this year, March through to May, it's reported externally that there have been a high volume of espionage, ransomware attacks, and zero-day exploits. Now, for anybody that might not know, a zero-day exploit is basically where there's a security vulnerability discovered in an item of software. But crucially, where the threat actors have actually found that vulnerability and have compromised it and are using that to compromise businesses before the software vendor themselves have either known about that vulnerability or released a patch for that vulnerability to mitigate the threat. So zero-day exploits in software are very, very serious indeed. And certainly in one context, maybe not entirely, but one context, when it comes to software vulnerabilities, presents the biggest threat here and now when they're discovered. So on top of that, the emergence of AI, as I've highlighted a couple of times already, and supply chain compromises are both emergent through March through to me as well. Now, supply chain compromises are very interesting. I read a report a couple of months ago of a business in the US which was being attempted to be hacked into by threat actors, and their security was so good that they couldn't break in. So a deviation of supply chain compromises took place here, whereby the threat actors then managed to hack into the business adjacent to them, nothing to do with the target business, but another business within the same office premises, and then managed to use their Wi-Fi to bunny hop, to jump from that initially compromised business into the target business and gain what they were setting out to achieve. So that's one form of pseudo supply chain compromise, nearby geographic businesses, which leads to the need to make sure that your Wi-Fi is also very secure, but also more traditionally, suppliers that you do actually work with, you can find that threat actors will compromise suppliers that deliver services or products into the target business and use them to bunny hop into the target business in question. The promising sign here, it's not all doom and gloom, the promising sign is that law enforcement, mainly in the US and Interpol, were reported to have made significant arrests and took down a number of organised cybercrime groups over that period as well. And I think the impression I get, I mean, I can't back this up with fact, but the impression I get, which is all I can offer, is that various law enforcement firms are really stepping up their focus here and taking it very, very seriously and recognise that cyber crime is a threat to industry and the economics of countries as well. So we're seeing a real step up there, which is encouraging. And then moving on to the summer, June, July, August this year, we ourselves in Digby Brown, with the software that we deploy and run for our business, we saw 450 software vulnerabilities announced by the software vendors in question. 9 of those were zero-day vulnerabilities. I'll come on and talk about patch management later on in terms of what we do about that, but that's what we saw with our own eyes across only the technology stack that we use in Digby Brown. It was also reported externally that more targeted ransomware campaigns took place with higher data exposure, unfortunately, as well. It was reported that the volume of zero-day attacks against software vulnerabilities was slightly lower in the spring, but the breach impact was a lot more severe. And also, further affirmation, AI and social engineering threats escalated during that period as well. So in summary, looking at the numbers in the table at the bottom, ransomware, over 100 major incidents took place, $50 million or beyond that was actually paid out due to ransomware attacks. There were 9 confirmed zero-day vulnerabilities that are all actively exploited by threat actors, and some of the companies externally that were breached as publicly recognised include Salesforce, Snowflake and Asbral, and they're actually all software vendors of various sorts. These companies there, obviously there'll be many more companies behind that faced breaches in that period. I've added in a link at the bottom here as well if you want to read quite a bit more detail on this. It's a useful link that will outline quite a lot more facts and figures around about what's happened over the last few months or so. So that gives you a flavour in terms of the kind of recent profile in terms of cyber breaches through the summer of 2025. So importantly, with regards to defences, where can or should we start? Firstly, my high recommendation would be establish the right governance within your organisation first. Make sure that governance involves the right people to manage the cybersecurity threats from a technical perspective, from a human perspective, and from a business impact perspective. And my personal recommendation should be, that should be involving right up to chief exec, management team, board level, however your business is structured, equity partner level, to ensure that the right key decision makers are aware and be involved in the decision-making process about security investment and security operations. It's important to mention it's not just about technology, business process and protection against cyber threats is really important. IT process is really important in that regard, and people understanding and people awareness and people doing the right things, not the wrong things with your employees and your suppliers is really important too. So you need to take a multifaceted approach, and the defence is it's not just about technology. There is no one silver bullet when it comes to technology to prevent cybersecurity attacks from succeeding. Obviously, investing in security is going to cost you to invest in that, but it's my belief, my strong belief, that not spending will actually eventually at some point cost you more, unfortunately, and that's because every business needs to be prepared that one day they will actually be attacked by cyber threat actors. As I've said already, multifaceted defences are really necessary. There is no single bullet. So with respect to all of that, I've created this diagram on the right-hand side, just a quick note, created it with AI to capture the framework I've got here, which might help you to embed the right governance and decision-making in your business. So starting at the top right, cost, risk and impact analysis for you. As your individual business is a really good starting point. Documenting the various risks that you face. What are the costs to mitigate those risks to the extent that your business requires, in line with business impact assessment, and through that, crucially establishing an annual cyber spend. I hasten to add that cyber spend isn't buying a one-off thing or doing a one-off thing. It's a continuum where you need to constantly evolve and invest and drive continuous improvement to manage the changing threat landscape as well over time. So that's another key recommendation I would offer. Education and awareness in the bottom right, managing your staff and your supply chain through regular phishing tests by way of one example. You can buy, there's a lot of software options out there you can buy, which you can use to then create mock but not real phishing emails, which can be used to test the awareness of your staff. And in conjunction with that, education and awareness through the definition, creation and the issue of cybersecurity policies is also really key. Down the bottom, technology investment kind of speaks for itself, looking to invest in security tools and optimize the ones you've already got from a security standpoint. Governance and oversight, I've touched on already, but one additional thing I would say here is maybe consider buying in some independent expertise to review your own cyber profile. People know what they know, but people don't know what they don't know, and sometimes it's useful to be able to get a second opinion from external expertise to cast a view about some of the things that you're maybe strong in cybersecurity, but some of the things you should consider as key risks and what to do about them. And then in the top left, it's a personal belief that the defence needs to be driven by a defence in depth strategy where you've got multiple layers of technology, human and process defence in place to give you measures that are both preventative in nature, but also reactive in terms of having very strong incident management capabilities should you suffer a direct attack or an attack against your business, which poses a significant threat. So no single defence is enough, and using that framework on the right-hand side, I hope that would give you, if you deem it necessary for your own business, a very good starting point to start the conversation and start a decision-making about what you might consider necessary for your own firm moving forwards. So in a way to further augment what I've said there on the defence in depth aspects, I've got a kind of very high level recommended cybersecurity technology model focusing only on the technology in this part here. It uses, it demonstrates some of the software that we use in Digby Brown. It's by no means exhaustive, but it gives you a very kind of high level flavour. So In terms of the storyboard in this slide, if you imagine on the World Wide Web, somebody's on the internet, it's an end user who works for your business. You want them to connect in remotely, working from home, as many firms do in this day and age. The first step I would highly recommend is having multi-factor authentication in place. This, if configured correctly, can give a very, very good set of defences against password theft. And that's because if a hacker manages to steal passwords of end users or accounts within your business, then they also require somebody who's got the phone to approve the multi-factor authentication request that's generated on that end user's phone. So obviously, if users comply and work with that properly, they would only approve a number matched multi-factor authentication request on their phone when they see that same number that appears on their screen when they're trying to log in, if they're legitimate. However, if they're not working, they're not logged in, not trying to log into a service that you've got in your own business, and they get a multi-factor authentication notice coming through with number matching in place, they don't know the correct number to enter, so they can't approve it. And furthermore, if they're taught and trained not to approve any authentication request like this coming through on their phone, unless they're trying to log into the name service in question at that time, then that coupled together can give you a very, very strong defense mechanism against password theft alone. From there, we use a product called Netscope, and what Netscope does, if I just show you the traditional method of having a firewall in place to protect you at a primary level, I call this the front door of the house. It's not an alarm system, it's not CCTV, it's purely the front door of the house, so it's limited in terms of the security that a firewall can provide from the internet. But we use something called Netscope, and effectively that's a paid for managed service from a software vendor and managed security services vendor called Netscope, where they wrap what I would refer to as a moat round about the drawbridge in the castle, the drawbridge being the firewall into your network. So we pay to Netscope for our remote access capabilities, but Netscope apply a huge amount of intelligence and event monitoring to look out for any suspicious threat attacks or attempts to get into the network remotely within Digby Brown. The firewall itself is really important with access control to only allow traffic in and indeed traffic out, which you review and permit, and therefore deny all other traffic as well. So the firewall is still an important aspect, albeit on its own, it's not a strong defense. So as an authenticated legitimate end user, they've got through the firewall, they've been authenticated and passed through Netscope. Internally in our network, we then run more than one 24/7 managed security services with outsourcing in place behind that. We don't do that in-house. Our incident management is in-house, as supported by the external vendors, but we do outsource on the basis that this is niche expertise and it's 24/7. So unless a business is very, very large, multinational, many IT employees within it with the skills as well, my recommendation is that this is the kind of thing to outsource and pay for and buy in, as opposed to trying to do it yourself. So as I say, we've got that monitoring in place where on the edge of our internal network, all the traffic, what we call telemetry in the world of IT, gets monitored and assessed, correlated by the 24/7 managed security service providers, and if they detect any possible or real threats, they alert that to us within the IT department, and then we'll work with them as required. Doesn't happen very often at all, but sometimes we need to work with them to assess if a threat is legitimate or not. Nearly all the time they're false positives, they're not real, but they still need investigated. But in the off chance that some are real, like an email with a dodgy link or whatever, per my opening slides, then that needs further investigation to look to mitigate any such threat that might exist. And then once we pass through that level of monitoring, we're then talking about authenticated remote access to the systems and data in Digby Brown. So what we do is quite a few things in this area. We've got Microsoft Defender, that's the chosen software suite we've decided to use for managing all the laptop and PC endpoints, managing all the servers, detecting virus, malware threats, dodgy emails, the list goes on, anything that could pose a threat to the business. And again, that Microsoft Defender software suite will alert us in IT 24/7 if it detects anything. And it's also tuned into the two managed security service providers who operate 24/7, so they too are also receiving such events and can act upon them if need be. I mentioned patching earlier on, 450 vulnerabilities in the last 3 months or so that we've patched against. For me, this is a continuous improvement area. We are now in a position where we patch extremely quickly every time a software vendor announces patches. Microsoft is one good example. They've got what they call Patch Tuesday, and the second Tuesday of every month. Late in our Tuesday night, being US time over there, they release all the patches for all the security vulnerabilities that they've mitigated against. As a business, we very rapidly put that through testing and deployment across every laptop and server in the business. And unfortunately, that's a recurring theme all the time. There is never any month where patching is not a thing because of the extent of the vulnerabilities being found in this day and age and having to be patched. So that's a really, really important IT operation to get right within the business in question. Encryption is also really important for data. We encrypt our critical data when it's both in transit and at rest. So that's a really important recommendation I would offer. And in addition to that, we also use software called Varonis. They too also provide 24/7 managed security services monitoring. But the difference here with Varonis versus the other two monitoring agreements we've got in place is that Varonis looks specifically at the data and looks for early warning signs of data theft, both en masse, but also potentially from internal threat actors. Which some businesses may have a large concern over that, other businesses maybe have very little concern, but that's basically the capability that Varonis provide to us as well. And once again, if they spot any threats regarding the data and the movement of data that looks suspicious, then they'll alert that to us in the IT department, and we'll work with them to better assess any threat that might exist there. Outside of the kind of flow of information in that black kind of bounded diagram that I've got there, I would also strongly recommend from a disaster recovery standpoint, prepare for being compromised, prepare for your data being encrypted and not accessible, in the sense that if you prepare for it with the right disaster recovery capabilities and you put in place what are called immutable backup capabilities with the right technology, then at the end of the day, you know that if you're in a horrible position where you're having to negotiate with threat actors once ransomware is deployed, you can say no, you can wipe all your servers, wipe all your devices, and restore all your critical data from backup. Immutable backups are different from normal backups in that they give a much heightened level of protection, in that if a threat actor managed to get onto your network and start compromising systems, the backups themselves that are immutable have got a very, very high level of protection from the threat actor being able to go and delete them to support their ransomware negotiations. So that's another strong recommendation I would make, get immutable backups in place. And then another key measure that we focus on a lot in Digby Brown is our Microsoft Secure Score. Through the Microsoft Defender software suite, Microsoft offer companies a portal by which they will look at every single configuration of the Microsoft technology you've put in place and give you a Microsoft Secure Score from 0 to 100. And they will give you a set of recommendations, exact steps about other configurations you can put in place to increase that Microsoft Secure Score over time, and they'll also give you an indicator of where your score sits against organizations of a similar size globally. So it's a good kind of benchmark indicator too. Just to add, our score isn't 75, it's quite a bit higher than that, quite a lot higher than that, but I just took this graphic online from the internet just to visualize the use of Microsoft Secure Score. So you need to purchase Microsoft Defender for that to get the Microsoft Secure Score capability. But if you have got Defender in place, then obviously for the IT teams, it's a real encouragement to use that as a good benchmark, and also for driving continuous improvement in terms of cyber security protection. Okay, so as I say, that's a high-level flavour of some of the defences we've got in place in Digby Brown. I suppose the flip side of that is that if you just rely on firewall protection, what you're going to see happen sooner or later at some point is you've got your firewall, you think that's enough, you think it's secure, you've got a threat actor out in the World Wide Web trying to compromise your network. They manage to find a way of doing that, whether it's through the firewall or through other means, but they manage to get through and onto your data and your systems. you're going to be blind to it without any monitoring in place. You won't know anything about it most likely until things get really bad. You suddenly get data stolen and posted online, or you're seeing your laptops and servers encrypting with ransomware. So that's a very simplistic pathway, but one of only many where if you don't have the eyes and ears for cybersecurity and the defense mechanisms in place in your network, you're putting yourself at much, much higher risk of compromise, and compromise it could become very, very serious indeed. So that's the rationale for my recommendations about the technology and other processes and controls to put in place. Okay, so moving on to looking a bit into the future. I need to be candid here. Everybody should expect and prepare to be attacked. It's almost inevitable given the plethora of threat actors out there and the mechanisms that they use in this day and age. A lot of it is ultimately organised crime, and some of these threat actors have got multi-million-pound data centres and many people working for them. So treat it in that regard. It's a serious threat. As I've said already, AI is now being used by hackers as well. Nobody is exempt. Microsoft and US federal agencies were compromised not that long ago as well. So it doesn't matter what size of business, size of cybersecurity capability you've got, what the nature of your business is. Everybody without exception is potentially open to compromise. So please bear that in mind for your own sake. Obviously ensure that you've got adequate cybersecurity insurance, and ensure through that obviously, just like your home insurance, your contents insurance, whatever, that the insurer knows exactly what cybersecurity you have got in place and what type you don't have in place. So the policy they give you is in effect mirroring what you've got, and therefore will pay out if something bad happens. So obviously get the cybersecurity insurance in place and protect your policies by making sure that insurers know exactly what you do and don't have in terms of cybersecurity controls. Another obvious statement here is that real-world events have moved the goalpost to, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. What's happening in the Middle East are two examples to cite here, where we've definitely seen with external intelligence given into ourselves and Digby Brown through some of our partners externally that threats are more diverse, they're more prolific, and world events like that are giving rise to them being more frequent and more widespread as well. So that's something to bear in mind. And again, as stated already, your own readiness is key here. By preparing to be compromised with a cybersecurity attack, make sure that both your tech defence in depth is in place and it's really strong and it's maintained, but also that your human incident management process and 24/7 here is really, really strong as well and able to respond if an attack is successful in your business. Where you are attacked, if that were to happen, I would propose that it's most likely that time will be of the essence in terms of how quickly and how accurately and how effective you can respond. And that's why the incident management process and people behind it is crucial as part of your defence in depth strategy there. Okay, so that's me. I'm just going to stop sharing. And I am more than happy to take any questions. And Natasha, if there are any, feel free, if there's any in the chat, feel free to shout out and let me know.
Thank you very much, Graeme, for that chat. I'm sure everyone will have found that as useful as I did. It was so interesting, especially all the AI stuff. I find all that so interesting at the moment. There's no questions at the moment, but like Graeme said, feel free to pop a question in. We'll wait about a couple minutes just in case anyone has any and has been waiting until the end to put one in. I actually also love that you had said that you created that graph with AI, and it's like it's doing so much now, isn't it? Technology's moving at such a rapid pace.
Yeah, there were quite a few tables or graphs in there that I did with AI, Natasha, rather than a traditional method of doing them in PowerPoint. Actually, that's why some of them get a couple of spelling mistakes in them, because the AI introduced the spelling mistakes. So I give you my word, I proofread the whole pack myself, but I couldn't change the couple of spelling mistakes in the slides with these AI graphs. So apologies for that. But yes, absolutely, Natasha, you're right. What AI can do now in multiple fronts is it's becoming better and better. So yeah.
And I think that's what's so helpful about the cybersecurity webinar, and just keeping up to date with everything as much as everyone can, because I think that especially with cybersecurity, things are moving at such a rapid pace, new things all the time, and it's just keeping on top of it.
Absolutely, and I would further add that if there's no questions here today, then that's absolutely fine, obviously. But if anything crops up after this event, or some of you want to speak to your IT colleagues in your law firms or anybody else, and you want to reach out and start any conversation, or drop me an email, then please do. I think it's an industry important thing, this. So yeah, I think information sharing around about it as well, and sharing experiences is really key. So yeah, that offer's there if anybody wants to take that up after the event.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We shall leave it there. I don't think anyone's got any confidence to ask any questions today. But like Graeme says, feel free to reach out. And thank you so much to everyone for coming on today and listening to the webinar.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. Much appreciated, and take care.